All right, today we are solving quadratic equations by square roots. And it says quadratic equations of the form ax squared plus c equals 0 can be solved using the square root property. These are the steps. Isolate x squared, which means get it by itself, take the square root of both sides, and then simplify the radical. So it says number one is x squared minus 64 equals 0. So step one, we need to isolate x squared. We need to get it by itself. Is it by itself? No. How do we get it by itself? Move 64 over. Plus 64. So now we have x squared equals 64. Is it by itself? Yes. Now what do? Take the square root of both sides. X squared. All right, and then the square root of x squared is x, because x times x is x squared, equals, and we're solving for x. The square root of 64 is 8, and we're done. So again, step one, isolate x squared, get it by itself. Then take the square root of both sides. Then we simplify the radical. All right, moving on. Number two, step one, isolate x squared. What do we do first? Minus 5, 81 x squared equals 16. Now, some of you might think x squared is by itself. I can move on, but it's not. We need to get rid of the 81 on this side. How do we do that? Do the opposite. Right now, it's 81 times x squared. So we're going to divide by 81. Now, x squared is by itself, and it equals to 16 divided by 81. Okay? Don't panic. It'll make sense in a second. So from here, we square root both sides. Square root both sides. That becomes x equals. Now, because the square root of x squared is x, now let's break down the other side. 16 over 81. That might look scary, but let's take the square root of each. What is the square root of 16? 4. All right. And what is the square root of 81? 9. Boom, there's our answer. So when you see a fraction, don't panic, just square root both of them. All right, so again, step one, we isolated the variable. We moved the 5 over, so it's plus 5, but we're going to subtract 5. 21 minus 5 is 16. Then we have 81x squared equals 16. Divide by 81 on both sides to get x squared by itself on the left. So we have x squared equals 16 divided by 81, square root both sides, and then you get x equals 4 over 9. All right, moving down, we got two more examples. All right, so again, same steps. Step one, get x squared by itself, isolate it. It's not by itself yet. So plus 9, 2x squared equals 64. It is still not by itself. Divide by 2, x squared equals 32. Now it's by itself, so we can square root both sides, x equals, now this time we don't have a perfect square. The square root of 32 isn't something easy as 2 or 4, what we did up above. Okay, so this is why what we did on Monday is very important. So we do the square root of 32, which we find matches. That can be 16, and that can be 2. Square root of 16 is 4 and 4, and then that 2 stays. So the 4s, because they pair up like we did on Monday, they go on the outside of the square root. This 2 stays inside the square root, so we have 4. The square root of 32 is 4 square root 2. So we know x for number 3 equals 4 square root of 2. And if that is confusing, you got to go back to Monday, where we found matches. We typed it in the calculator, menu 2, 3. We found factors. And if we're square rooting 32, we find pairs. The pairs were 4. 4 goes on the outside of the square root. And 2, because 2 didn't have a pair, didn't have a partner, it stays inside. So x equals 4 square root 2. Number 4 is going to be kind of the same with what we just did. First thing, subtract 4, negative 3x squared equals negative 81 because negative 77 minus 4 more is negative 81. Divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3, x squared equals positive 27. Take the square root of both sides. X equals, that'd be 9, and that'd be 3, that'd be 3 again. So it's 3 square root 3. So x equals 3 square root 3. All right, those are the 4 notes here. This should be pretty easy. Complete the worksheet, turn it in. Let me know if you have any questions. Rewatch the video if you need to. All right, this shouldn't be that bad. Step 1, isolate x squared, get it by itself. Step 2, you square root both sides. If it's not a perfect square, like 27 and 32 over here, we have to do what we learned Monday. 9 times 3 is 27. 3 and 3, these are pairs, so it goes on the outside of the square root. This 3 doesn't have a partner, so it stays on the inside.